listening to 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with John Gallo and on 90.3 WHPC. This is this week's Long Island News. Oh, it's been quite a day already. But as we usually, when you tune in, we try to give you the current temperature, and you know what? It looks really pretty out there, doesn't it? It's crazy these days is how fast it can change.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, yesterday, perfect example.
I don't know. It's probably selective memory, but you used to be able to see things coming, you know? And nowadays it's like...
Well, it's like the tropical weather. It's like you're in Miami, but instead of it being, you know, beautiful and warm afterwards, it's still just cold, but maybe a little less gray and a little less rainy, I guess. We have an interview to get off the bat right now, so let's get us into that right now.
Yeah, let's see if Alfonso's on the phone.
Yeah, he is, and we're going to talk about some of the transit stories that were reported last week that we spoke about, and some of the changes that may affect our listeners' commute.
Well, last week was a busy week for the LIRR after Governor Cuomo unveiled a new plan to expand Penn Station and the performance audit. It was also announced immediate Penn Station upgrades would affect LIRR train service during rush hours until March 8th. And we have with us Alfonso Castillo from Newsday. We want to say hello to Alfonso. You there?
I am here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you for calling in. We want to thank Newsday for
having us access the reporting.
Yeah, well, so last week, now Governor Cuomo, he unveiled a new plan to expand Penn Station. When are we going to start that? When is that going to?
That's probably still a number of years away. So what that calls for is buying, the state would purchase, they'd acquire the block south of Penn Station and essentially knock everything down and then build underneath 8 new tracks that would connect to Penn Station just south of the existing tracks and then build over it. I mean, the plan would be to redevelop the whole block, kind of a higher end buildings, companies than what's there now. And the thought is that the revenue they would generate from redeveloping that block would essentially pay for all the work. So it is a big vision. It's something that's been out there before. Amtrak had a similar proposal for a number of years as part of their big Gateway project. Yep. But it's not happening anytime soon. It's something that's going to take 2 to 3 years just to study. And most people I talk to think that if this does go forward, you're talking maybe 10 years from now, this being complete.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that's what makes sense with a lot of the things in the state of the state.
Yeah, I would also imagine, though, that isn't there going to be a legal reaction to this by maybe some of the people who own those businesses that they're expecting to just wipe off the face of the map there?
Do we know this far out? Are most of those properties that were listed in that area kind of willing or looking to potentially come to the table, or do we know of any of them who want to kind of hold out this far out?
I know I've seen reports about some saying they're not interested in selling. Remember here that the state has eminent domain powers. So if it came to that, now that could be a prolonged court battle, and I'm sure nobody wants that. The folks I talked to in the state, Empire State Development, which is leading the real estate portion of this deal, their take is that these people have essentially been on notice for a long time, dating back to the Chris Christie Arc Tunnel project that is now, 10 years older or older. I think there is the thought that the real estate on that block right now is not the most desirable, that it's sort of underdeveloped right now. What's there is pizza shops, bars, parking garages, that kind of thing. And it's the West Side, which is booming right now.
Yeah, still definitely not a shanty town by any extent.
So it's possible that some of the people that have businesses right now there, in their leases, could be something to the effect of you can't stay forever.
Yeah, sure. One of the kind of ironic ones was I don't know if you know what Trax Bar and Grill, which is like an institution in Penn Station, and because of work that's going on in Penn Station right now, they were given the boot last summer and found a new home. I was there earlier this week on 31st and between 7th and 8th, right across the street from Penn Station.
So Trax by the Trax.
Wow.
Yeah, before long, looks like they're going to be packing their stuff yet again because they're on the block that's got to go.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That definitely seems to be a bit of the way out. But we did see that there was also an LIRR audit that came out last week that you covered, and it looked like it said that there was some potential concerns about methodology from the state comptroller's office. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they looked at a couple of different metrics, and the ones that they took issue with the Long Island Railroad was how they measure ridership and how they measure something called MDBF, which is mean distance between failures, which is a measure of how long a train travels before it breaks down.
Yeah.
And the point that they made is that the LIRR measures MDBF by individual train car versus a whole train that might be 10 cars, 12 cars. And so the numbers that they put out there, when they say, I think last year their MDBF was in the neighborhood of 185,000 miles. So when they say a train, an average LIR train travels 185,000 miles before it breaks down, the comptroller's point is, well, you really have to divide that by 10 on
that's a big
average.
difference.
So it's really a tenth of that.
So the data could be skewed.
That was
is the
one
concern.
issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is the same. I think it's the same reason I love statistics.
Yeah.
It's all about
the
your
railroad
methodology.
The railroad makes the point that this is the way they've always measured it, and this is the way the entire industry measures it. So this isn't them trying to play any games or anything like that. This is the industry standard. And they also make the point that measure in particular is not really, they've reported, but it's not really meant for public consumption as much as it is an internal measure for them as they manage their fleet, figure out what needs maintaining, and so it's a number that they feel has less meaning for riders than it does for them. Numbers that should mean more to riders or stuff like on-time performance.
Of course.
And folks have their own issues about how that's counted too.
Okay, still important, but like you said, that makes sense. I guess the last thing maybe we wanted to talk about too was some of the changes that are happening now, right?
the train for the service interruptions and things that are there's work going on though right now, isn't there, in Penn Station? And
it wasn't supposed to affect some of the peak trains that were going to be diverted through Atlantic Terminal. That's what we were reading, and I think was reported last week. Is that correct?
So since a couple of years ago, what the governor called the Summer of Hell, when Amtrak started replacing a lot of their old infrastructure in Penn Station, which they own, there's been this steady work inside Penn Station for the better part of what's sort of been 2.5 years now. At least one track or a couple tracks has been out of service. They do some work. And there for a little while, the second half of last year after the summer, there was, I think it probably has prolonged the lull there's been, where there was really nothing going from Amtrak's side. And LIR finally had all its tracks back for the first time in a long time, running full service. And I think beginning last week, back to some more work at Penn Station. I think 1 or 2 tracks over the next few months are going to be out of service. And it means the Long Island Railroad curtailing some of their rush hour service. It's not overwhelming. I think it's in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 trains in the morning and in the evening. But I've certainly heard from folks who say that makes all the difference. In some cases it means where there used to be 2 trains departing within a few minutes of each other on one line, there's 1. And what that means is twice as many people getting on that one train.
Right.
Extra crowd.
So that's not fun.
Yeah. Okay, understand. Yeah, no, we'll have to keep looking into that and see what changes come, like you said, as plans move ahead. But all right, thank you again. And
thank you very much, Alfonso. I know you probably have a deadline today, or?
Yeah, I actually got a meeting with editors in a little bit about some stuff that we're hoping to do. So
okay,
exciting times.
We'll be
like there isn't enough to cover.
Exactly, keeping track of everything you do. I know you were talking about the new train cars, and we saw you post a video about that. So we know our listeners, if they want, they can follow your stories. Obviously, in Newsday, of course, at Newsday.com, but also on Twitter. Is it correct that at Alfonso Reports?
That's right, at Alfonso Reports. Also on Instagram, I can't remember. I think it's Alfonso Castillo Senior SR.
Okay.
On Instagram.
Okay,
great.
so
Very
do a little
cool.
Googling. But okay, thank you again.
And we hope you'll keep in touch with us.
Absolutely. Always happy to talk to you guys.
We hear what's going on. Thank you very much, Alfonso.
Yeah.
Have a great
All
weekend.
right, have a good weekend.
You too.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care. All right, well,
had a great talk with Alfonso. He's on all of the. He's got apparently all of the transportation stories for the MTA and
we were saying he had a busy week last week. So whenever you hear Newsday articles coming up about transit stories, he's definitely one of the main people on that beat. There's a few others as well, but we're glad that he was able to join us and kind of digest some of what we spoke about the week before and give us a little more detail and nuance, including that ongoing battle that may be trying to get those tenants out for the expansion.
Yeah, that just seems, and it's really, I always feel like it's really a shame when a municipality or the state or whatever has to resort to eminent domain. Because that just tells you somebody doesn't want it done.
Well, the whole key is it should be an ultimate last resort for the public good, but it's a real difficult thing to really, especially to the people who are there living.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, I know we had this issue kind of near me in Flushing around the Willits Point area, around a lot of businesses, and that's different because those aren't multi-million, extremely expensive properties, right. So they have a different type of stake. But for these,
I also wonder if you're, let's just say you owned one of those buildings south of Penn Station, and they approach you and you turn down whatever offer they give you, and then eminent domain kicks in. What rules kick in with that kind of? You may a week later say, I should have taken the offer.
That's the whole thing. People do talk about that there's this kind of period where, you can get maybe a little more leverage by holding out as long as you can, but at a certain point, like you said, now you've lost everything, and now you're still losing your property, and you'll be compensated maybe just the minimum versus...
For a tenth of what you
whatever the formula is for that. But
we should look into that.
Yep, we will.
See
so,
what's going on.
Like I said, we have a lot of other headlines.
Yeah, let's see. This was... oh, my God. Yeah, this was something. Plainview man was shot to death in front of his home. He may have had a dispute with another motorist before he was gunned down. Justin Gottlieb, 27 years old, was shot multiple times at about 5:30 p.m. Tuesday on Margaret Drive East as he tried to exit his red Ford Explorer. Police announced today that they're still searching for a suspect or suspects in the shooting. Nassau Police Detective Lieutenant Stephen Fitzpatrick, commanding officer of the homicide unit, announced that police are asking for the public's help regarding an altercation between Gottlieb and another motorist after he left his job in Jericho and headed home.
Somewhere between Jericho and Plainview, something happened between Justin and a white four-door sedan. Justin was working in an electrical supply. He left work at 5 o'clock, like I said, and he went straight home to his family.
Well, I know, police have caught people with less information, so, we're really hoping that something comes from that. That's
definitely hoping
that's crazy.
For public support, and it's just one of those really unfortunate incidents that seem to just escalate way out of control.
Well, and to add to that, he was pronounced dead at a hospital just about an hour later after that happened, and a GoFundMe page has been set up to help his fiancée. They initially were just seeking $2,100, but it has swelled to more than $80,000 in donations last night. So people feeling really bad about what happened here. That's...
Yeah, but like the, again, presiding officer had said, if you had seen anything and were happened to be in that area, we know tons of cars are on the highway at that time of the day moving back and forth. If you think you might have seen something, you could always call the tip line from NCPD, and you can find that easily on Google. And like I said, if you know something, I'm sure...
If you saw something, say something.
Yeah, anything could help, I'm sure, that family in a time of grieving.
Yeah, really. And in some other news, Congress members call for sanctions against Egypt over a Long Island man's prison death. This is from Zachary Dowdy from Newsday. Local members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are calling for sanctions against Egypt 3 days after a Bethpage man died in custody in Cairo while on a hunger strike. Mustafa Qassem had been held for 6 years in Egyptian prisons following allegedly being beaten and arrested by military authorities during a crackdown on dissent. The 53-year-old Qassem was a native of Egypt and a naturalized U.S. citizen. Numerous U.S. senators and Congress members have sent a letter to President Donald Trump calling for sanctions against Egyptian officials. The letter said... He was arrested at a shopping center, beaten after showing his U.S. passport, detained and denied critical access to medicine and medical care. He was in pre-trial detention for over 5 years before being convicted of trying to overthrow the Sisi government in a sham mass trial with 738 other defendants, violating all standards of due process. It continued, Egyptian officials never presented any evidence implicating Qassem because there was none. These actions against a U.S. citizen are particularly egregious as the United States provides approximately $1.4 billion in foreign assistance to Egypt annually. Well, Qassem went on a hunger strike in September of 2018 to protest his conviction and 15-year prison term, and he had written at least 2 letters to Trump. Qassem and his family said that the former auto shop owner was in the wrong place at the wrong time when he was arrested by Egyptian authorities during a crackdown on dissent following the overthrow in 2013 of then Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi. Wow.
Yeah, international news comes right to Long Island, it looks like. Really sad case, it seems like.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm here I go with my crazy brain is connecting the dots. I'm thinking about the law we just passed that everybody's all TO'd. This guy spent 5 years in jail, wasn't even charged with a crime.
Yeah, that's supposed to be one of the main distinctions of the American judicial system, due process. And unfortunately, we see that Americans and the citizens of those countries are not afforded the due process that is one of those rights enshrined in our American institutions. But like you said,
well, you know what, and what like Benjamin Franklin said, if you can keep them.
Yeah, that's the key. And the bail reform discussion here on Long Island definitely really highlights the kind of underpinnings of that.
I mean, I understand that new law. I was under the impression that it was nonviolent misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. Now, all right, so one guy was convicted of drunk driving, and he was on a, I guess the Parkway or some roadside, and someone got killed in the accident that he was in.
Yeah.
Would you say that he's under the new law and should not be bailed out, or should he be bailed out?
Well, that's the whole key, that I think that we're playing this game as the public, trying to understand, what makes sense.
This is why I think the law should be amended, and it should give judges some discretion.
Yeah.
I don't like one size fits all. It obviously doesn't work for anything.
No, it's too complex of an issue.
A classroom, it doesn't work for anything.
Too many outliers.
So why do we do that?
Yeah.
Because we think we're going to take one big broad, we took care of it. No, it didn't.
That's true. And that's why, I don't know, we're going to try to have time to talk about it a little later in depth, but we know that the Long Island congressional and other local legislators, the delegation, I think is known as the Gang of Six even out here, they've been talking about amending that law since last year before it passed, but now, especially with all the public kind of backlash to it, understandably, to a large extent, or to some extent, that they will probably be looking to changing that law and giving additional discretions and additional kind of statutes.
I still think the law should stand.
Yeah, and the thing is, it makes it tough, though, for people who, like you said, highlight the underlining benefits of it and the principles behind it.
Well, that's like we said on the show, I guess it was 2 weeks ago when the thing came up. This law didn't just come out of thin air. There's a reason for it. Somebody really wanted it, or a group of people decided that it was needed.
Yeah.
It's the form that it's in, no, maybe not necessarily.
No, exactly. And that's, like you said, the point is we can't have things get out of hand like we see what happened in Egypt with that individual and see it become an international tragedy. And, but Turkey, just quickly, again, they have a history like some other countries, that specific incident. But I was just reading the other day, there was this World Star, the World Cup soccer team for Turkey, and also one of these great sports stars, and he was at the peak of Turkish society about 10-15 years ago when they were winning, but he wound up becoming, at least by the eyes of the government, Erdogan, a dissident, and now he's, I think, driving an Uber in Denver because he's not allowed back in the country. They've again done all these things to basically harass, at least allegedly, his family, like we've seen with other people in different levels there in other countries. So like you said, we need certain protections, even if they may not always give us really great results all the time. You need to kind of work it out. And,
it's kind of like if you never reach the ideal, does that mean you get rid of the ideal?
Exactly. Like you said, you have to kind of try to work towards
try to hit to that ideal. And
like you said,
the closer you get, the better it is. But anyway. And in some other news, a state comptroller school property taxes capped at 1.81% for 2020 to 21. This is a story from John Hildebrand. State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli announced that growth in school property taxes for Long Island and the rest of the state will be capped at 1.81% for the 2020-21 academic year, representing the tightest restriction in 3 years. Annual caps set by the state based on inflation rates limit the amount of revenue known as tax levies that school systems and municipalities can raise in any given year. Next year's restriction is tighter than the 2% cap set in 2019-20 and 2018-19. DiNapoli said in a statement local governments will have to examine their budgets more closely to control expenses. While Albany's latest announcement on caps was expected, it underlines the more general fiscal worries confronting the island's 124 school districts. The state itself faces a looming $6 billion budget deficit, and local school administrators are anxiously awaiting Governor Andrew M. Cuomo's budget message, which is due later this month. Such messages include proposals for state financial assistance to school districts, which constitutes about 25% of the more than $13 billion being spent this year on the island's public schools. Well, school advocates noted, however, that enrollments actually are rising in some districts, especially in communities experiencing large growth in immigrant populations. Riverhead has formed a lobbying alliance with 4 other suburban districts, Glen Cove and Westbury on the island, along with Ossining and Portchester in Westchester County, all of which contend the state's aid distribution formula shortchanges their students. Yeah, that's always been a big thing, though, except now with the the influx of immigration and having to figure out where to put people.
Yeah, and how the proportional kind of tax, I guess, revenue from different communities has to be distributed, but how both the parties at the lower end of the economic strata and at the top feel that there's some kind of equity. It is always a struggle, definitely. It seems.
But $13 billion.
I mean, that's what the number that caught my eye. Look, we're facing a $6 billion budget deficit. So theoretically, if we got rid of all the schooling for 1 year, we'd make it back up. I don't think we're going to have that program anytime soon. But
homeschooling for everybody,
just for 1 year, just trying to
stay home for a year. Everybody, teach your kids some stuff. And then,
I don't know how teacher unions would feel about it either.
But you know what? If we even did that and it worked, they all stayed home. We saved $13 billion. Yeah. They would figure out how to spend it before we ever even got to talk about what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, it might be a little bit longer than the 1 year,
you know what I mean?
All of a sudden.
Yeah, right.
But like I said, we'll see what happens.
And let's see what else we have here. Amazon plans a 3rd Long Island warehouse, according to Nassau officials. This is a story by James Madore and Dandan Zhu. Local officials announced yesterday that Amazon plans to open another local warehouse on the site of a long-closed grocery store in Carl Place. The internet retailing giant is working with a local developer to convert the former Wallbaum supermarket at 2nd Westbury Avenue into a distribution center. Well, this is number 2 Westbury Avenue into a distribution center. Viviana Russell, a town of North Hempstead councilwoman, met with Amazon representatives and advised them to speak with the Carl Place Civic Association and other community groups about potential traffic congestion. An Amazon official said the company didn't have any news to share at this time. But Nassau County officials said the retailer had submitted documents for necessary approvals. Nassau County can confirm that we have received a site plan for a last-mile location for Amazon, said Christine Geed, a spokeswoman for County Executive Laura Curran. Nassau County is very excited about that. Well, Amazon already has 2 other facilities in Nassau, 201 Grumman Road West and 80 Grumman Road West, both in Bethpage, and both owned by developer Steel Equities of Bethpage. The Carl Place Civic Association said it does have concerns about the warehouse plan.
Yeah.
You want to work for Amazon?
I mean, it looks like there may be some more openings. Hopefully the conditions are, as good as they can be. I didn't even realize. Did you know that there was that big hub out in Bethpage, out by the Grumman former plant? I wasn't aware of that.
No.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess, 2 facilities, like you said, that they have. So this one is pretty close to where we are right now. This is, I know that Wallbaum's right off of, what is that main strip, like Zeckendorf or one of those, connecting streets over to Hempstead over by the mall.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. It looks like there may be some community pushback, but not anywhere near as much as there was in Long Island City or places like that.
You know what? I'm just thrilled they're not getting $3 billion to bring people here.
That's the key. And actually, it was reported last week that it was, I think, an additional $1 billion or more that was not reported and what was going to be given in tax abatements. And, like I said, if they're going to do business out here,
it boggles the mind.
It needs to be some kind of
the richest guy in the world definitely needs more money, and he needs more of your money, not just money, but your money.
Well, it's got to come from someone, and I guess you are as good as anyone.
I don't know. I just
we'll keep watching.
What would you say? Because I may be off the wall thinking about this, but let's just capitalism. Mm-hmm. If it can, where we are now, right? Yeah. You've got what? 10 people maybe that have more wealth than the rest.
Today they just announced Google was, I think, the 7th company to hit the $1 trillion mark. Just to speak to your point.
So would you say that capitalism is a successful system?
I mean, that's a debate that's being had by, obviously, economists and academics, and I think it really goes up to where your position is. If you're Jeff Bezos, I'm sure you'd say, yeah, it's great. If you're someone who's making less than $7 an hour, it may not be shaking out as well.
I'm just basically asking people, if you have a system and the result is that 10% of the people wind up with all of the material in the world, I guess, did that work? Is that supposed to happen?
That's a very important question. That it's difficult because there's a lot of social taboos.
And of course, people with money are going to tell me, yes, it works perfectly. Yeah. I get that. They're also the same people telling me we can't afford universal health care. Yeah. And we can't afford things for people. I get it. Yeah. That's your agenda. That's not truth.
No, there's subjectivity to it.
But my point just being, as a system, when that is the end result, can you say the system was successful?
I mean, again, like I said, I think trying to stay as objective as I can, it's difficult because if you look at it, again, empirically, you'll see that wealth is created at a very high rate, but who is that wealth, again, distributed to is what the critics will say.
One of the things I would say is that capitalism is probably, I think even in one of his books, Karl Marx might have even said that capitalism is the best thing since sliced bread for a new country.
Yeah.
Because it's the fastest way to get goods and services to the people. Okay, I get that. But when late-stage capitalism, which is what we're in, has become... I don't think it was the picture of what they're looking at then as capitalism.
No, and again...
I think it's been a little hijacked from...
That's the concern. The idea of, the cost of business and the concerns like we speak about here with water, like externalities and things that are accepted as, just the cost of doing business.
Cost of doing business.
I think that we are starting to see a kind of alignment and people at least being willing to question just what is as merited as we have been told it is. So, like I said, it's an interesting discussion, and I'm glad that you're willing to have it. But I think we'll dig into that.
Oh, I never thought we'd get an answer. But it's just something that I don't know. To see an imbalance like that, and then look at the system and say, "Well, it's working great."
Yeah.
Those two things don't correlate with me. They just don't.
Well, again, feudalism was the dominant system, and then that changed over time, and people will say that, like everything else, things will evolve, and we see even places that are supposedly state communist like China, they're enacting, plenty of capitalist market measures and doing things that again
they can cherry pick, though. They can pick the things that definitely work.
Yeah.
And ignore or jettison the
That's
things
a whole other beast over there. You definitely have no free markets whatsoever. You have just whatever the Chinese market says.
Yeah. But. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Laura Curran to the National Hockey League. Let the Islanders play all of next season at Nassau Coliseum. Well, there you go. Here's a story by Jim Baumbach from Newsday. Nassau County Executive Laura Curran has asked the National Hockey League to consider moving all Islander games to NYCB Live's Nassau Coliseum next season before they open their Belmont Park Arena in 2021. In a letter to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman on Thursday, which Curran also posted on Twitter, the county executive wrote, "It's what the fans want. It's what the players want. Let us rock the barn for one more full and final year." In response, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said in a statement to Newsday, "We appreciate the county executive's passion and interest. The request is a little premature, but it's something we'll consider at the appropriate time." An Islanders spokesman said the team is keeping in touch with Bettman on the matter. And as construction on the Islanders' new arena continues at Belmont, the team currently is in the second year of an unusual 3-year deal in which they're splitting their home games between 2 local arenas, the Coliseum and Brooklyn's Barclays Center. Initially, the NHL was reluctant to allow more than half of their games at the Coliseum, the Islanders' home, from 1972 until 2015, because league officials said the 13,900-seat arena lacked modern amenities, such as suites and large concourses, and therefore is not considered an NHL Major League facility. But the league's stance on allowing more games there softened somewhat as the Islanders' Belmont Arena plans successfully moved through the state's approval process.
Yeah, that's one that crosses both sports news and
I just think it's interesting
news.
that the 2 venues that the Islanders are bouncing back and forth between are both owned by the same company.
Yeah, and what really stands out to me, too, is seeing that the issue that they had previously about the capacity and everything else, and we have our sports guys telling you more probably about the Islanders and everything else later, but just seeing that, there was such an issue by the commissioners saying that you couldn't go to this place, and the seats didn't change or anything like that, but at the same time, now that it's all been settled, now they're willing to let people maybe come back there. Yeah,
you know what? We just grabbed Eric Fischetti from the sports show.
Yeah, I just happened to stroll in. I just happened to stroll in at the perfect time.
Yep.
So you're talking about the Islanders potentially playing all their games at the National Coliseum next year.
Yep.
Laura Coran actually sent something in to...
just read it. That's what we just read it.
I didn't even hear it. All right.
Cool. But the commissioner, I guess, responded saying that
basically what happened...
It's too far out.
Basically what happened was, specifically last year, when they finally made their return to the Coliseum, they made their debut in December against the Blue Jackets, everything was selling out. It's because... a lot of Islander fans had the feeling of, why do I need to go to Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Like it never felt right.
No,
which
it feels like home here.
Oh, we talked about
exactly.
all of that. Yeah.
Which I was on that train too, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Like Brooklyn never felt like home anyway. And then when they finally came back here, they split the difference between Barclays Center and Nassau Coliseum. Yeah. And if you notice, if you're an Islander fan, you notice how Barclays Center is almost half empty all the time, every time they play, because a lot of Islander fans have the same thought. Why am I going to have to go to trek all my way to Brooklyn, while meanwhile next week they're playing the Blues at Nassau Coliseum.
Exactly.
So what Laura Coran is doing is that in the playoffs last year, it was huge news when the NHL and Gary Bettman basically said, we'll just have their first round games at the Coliseum. Great, awesome.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the reasons why they went on to the next round.
Yeah, the intensity was up and everything.
But because the Nassau Coliseum is not, in their words, NHL standards, meaning the size, they couldn't play round 2, 3, or the Stanley Cup final if they ever got there.
They wanted to extract more revenue from the suites and everything else.
Exactly. They wanted to have more butts in the seats. They wanted to sell more food because, it's not a secret. Barclays Center is bigger, and they support more people.
And yet, when they revamped the Nassau Coliseum, I think they lost 1,300
They did,
seats.
yeah. Actually, the Nassau Coliseum is next to the stadium in Winnipeg. Nassau Coliseum is one of the smallest venues in the NHL, which means it's the most loudest.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
that's a home advantage that everyone spoke about, seeing that how much more passion it would get from the players, even just knowing that it wasn't just the fair weather fans like we see sometimes Brooklyn Nets, and other places.
Exactly.
Even the Knicks, to be honest, where people come in for the spectacle versus the diehards who've grown up intergenerationally with the Islanders out here,
exactly.
like you.
Yeah. I'll see you in 20 minutes.
Yep.
All right,
there's a
you,
tease for their show later.
Well, there you go. You got it from the horse's mouth,
exactly.
Right? From the guys that. Although, I mean, I'd like to get Eric in here. There's a lot of other things we could talk about. The new arena, and all. It's kind of strange to me to see if you're a rabid Islander fan that you're going to split your games between. You're going to go to the mall.
Well, you would think again.
Although we initially knew when we asked, nobody wants to take a train to Brooklyn to see their team.
I mean, we're a bridge and tunnel kind of crowd out in Long Island, and, I know people who live just in Suffolk, and when they go into Manhattan, they stay the night in a cheap hotel because they're not trying to take the long commute back. So, like I said, maybe some of it is
I just don't know what
some might be a little bit of just comfort.
It seems to be mostly politics for some reason. get that feeling.
I think that's definitely underlining, whether it was with the former county executive, again, who we spoke about before in the past, Kate Murray, who caught a lot of flack for her position early, or now I think it's Laura Curran trying to seem like she's basically of the people.
She's fighting for Nassau. I get that.
And no, of course, like you said,
no problem.
Why wouldn't you want the revenue to go to Nassau County versus Kings County in Brooklyn?
Yeah, that's her job.
So it makes perfect sense, but it seems like, as the commissioner said, and as I was reading, it's going to take some time, and it was premature, basically, this letter, in terms of actually having an impact. We're going to have to see what the NHL says, but it seems possible, and I'm sure there will be a lot of public social media kind of, pushing from fans to say, come back out to the island for the last season before they finally move to the Hempstead Arena that's being built.
Right, it's
not Hempstead, excuse me, Belmont. That's what I meant. Yep, right. Belmont. We're in.
And what's going to happen in the Coliseum when that happens?
That's what we were talking about with the new town executive, Don Clavin, who, again, they talk about this other type of different experience for other things, but there's not going to be any cornerstone sports franchise occupying that building anymore, at least at the high, big three professional level.
Yeah, right.
So,
all right, well, and in some other news, we have, more than... This is a story. Thousands on Long Island march in Mineola against anti-Semitism. This is Rachel Blidner from Newsday. More than 2,000 Long Islanders wearing yarmulkes, hijabs, and baseball caps walked side by side Sunday to march against anti-Semitism, proclaiming their unity in the face of a rise in hate crimes across the region. They marched almost a mile together from an intersection near the state Supreme Courthouse in Mineola, down Old Country Road, and up the steps of the Nassau County Legislature. Religious leaders, politicians, and community advocates from throughout Long Island then spoke until the sun set of their own experiences with anti-Semitism and proposed ways to combat it through education and law enforcement. They urged people to stand together against hate. The march was one of the first events hosted by the island-wide task force against anti-Semitism and symbols of hate. The group was launched last month to identify ways to combat hate. It came less than a month after 5 people were injured when a knife-wielding man, identified by police as Grafton E. Thomas, 37, stormed into the home of a rabbi in an Orthodox Jewish community in the town of Muncie. Officials also pointed to an increase in reported hate crimes in the state, including graffiti of swastikas found last month at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County in Glen Cove.
Yeah, it's good to see at least some light comes out of a lot of darkness, and that people come together and try to, I guess, show that, we care about each other on Long Island, and it's unacceptable, anything like that, and it won't be tolerated.
And we talked about it when we talked about politics and how politics reflects the politics of 1939.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And this is another reflection of 1939.
Back in the century ago, unfortunately, with a lot of these things that we see. And
Bingo.
Like I said, at least thankfully, people will come together, and the irony of it is that the people who have that hate in their hearts and do these heinous, terrible, horrific acts, all they do is empower the community to be more vigilant and to take care of your own and to take care of each other.
That's all you can do is hope that. And in that vein, listen, if you see something you can do nice for somebody, do it.
Yeah.
What's the, especially if it's something easy.
Yep.
Picking up your neighbor's paper while you happen to be walking that way anyway.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
The more positivity, the better.
Right. Even on a small level, it can be magnified. Just a little thing, a smile to somebody can make a whole difference.
Exactly. Drown out the hate in aggregate.
That's all I see. Look, it's going to be us on the front lines because it doesn't look like our leaders and a lot of the people who are in charge of trying to make the world a better place are actually in the business of doing that.
Well, they usually,
so we need to do that.
Yeah, a little Johnny-come-lately, a little bit after the fact. But again, some have been doing things, but like you said, it's when these types of things happen.
My feeling in most cases is that most politicians spend most of their job time figuring out how to get reelected, not doing the job that I expected them to do.
There's a lot of call time, as it's referred to, and a lot of other things that aren't the, again, kind of things that are supposed to be those... positions of why you go into public service.
If you were in your workplace and you needed to spend time to do something that was going to benefit you, do you think your workplace would pay you to do that?
Not unless it benefited them even more than me.
Bingo.
So
anyway, and in some other news, we have lights, camera, surgery. the Long Island Hospital among first using black box technology. This is a story by Lisa L. Colangelo from Newsday. And in an operating room at Long Island Jewish Medical Center, a collection of video cameras, microphones, and other sensors monitor the scene, from the delicate surgical procedure to the number of times a doctor's phone rings. The hospital in New Hyde Park says it is the first in the nation to use a virtual black box designed to record information used to evaluate systems, improve safety, and head off errors. The OR black box technology was developed by a Canadian surgeon and scientist leading a team of researchers at the International Center for Surgical Safety in Toronto. It's being used at 9 other hospitals in Canada and Western Europe and will expand to a second room at Long Island Jewish Medical Center this month. Grant Charov said, "We developed systems that could measure the performance of the surgeon, the team, the devices, the state of the patient, and other factors. In addition, we can measure how the patient is doing. Now we can, for the first time, bring all those data feeds together." Cavusi said preliminary reports have provided some interesting findings about common noise, interruptions, and distractions in operating rooms. At any time a person enters or exits an operating room, there is potential risk for bringing bacteria into the space, he noted. Having equipment on hand can also shorten the time a patient is under anesthesia by about 15 minutes, according to Cavusi.
Yeah, Cavusi, I believe, was the one of the lead researchers who I guess I forgot to mention in the story previously. But yeah, it's an interesting piece of technology, and it's good to see that.
It's a good idea. I would like to talk to surgeons about how they feel about it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm sure some will feel good. Not just we want to think what it comes down to a lot of times, which is liabilities. Yeah. But at the same time, it may protect people from certain claims.
I'm sure it does.
And it will also, open people up to more claims. But the whole key is help the patients.
The real key thing, if you're really interested in doing good things and the right thing, is that you could critique an operation and see, what were you doing there? Well, I had the sutures. I did. Oh, okay. Well, maybe next time we do.
Yeah, for
which you don't know if
too.
that happens all the time.
Yeah, no, there are these academic kind of, I'm sure, ways that people do review certain things, but like you said, if people do it for sports and like the equivalent of game film, why not have it so that all that data is there in real time and people can monitor all these things? And it's just a sign of the future, and hopefully it helps with a lot of concerns that people rightfully have when they go under the knife, like sepsis, which we see, and other issues that you go in for some minor infection or some minor situation, and all of a sudden now you have this life-threatening infection.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's one of the it seems to be the wave of the our future. You want to get a really good germ, go to a hospital.
That's what they're concerned about. Gram negatives, these super bugs, as they're kind of called out in the public, and there's big concerns, and that's been growing in the public health community. Those fears, CDC and everything, and if this helps that, then that's a great thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this story now has been bouncing around for a little while, and hopefully.
You want to talk about the Gilgo, the new? Do we want to? I guess, I think at this point, it makes sense. Let's go there. We can do that, and then we have an environmental bonds proposal that we want to talk about too. So
yes,
we do that. Yeah.
Well, this is a story. Police release image of a belt in Gilgo Beach murder probe. This was by Robert Brodsky, Michael O'Keefe, and Nicole Fuller. Suffolk County Police released an image of a black leather belt yesterday, believed to have been handled by a potential suspect in the Gilgo Beach killings, marking a new chapter in the decade-long investigation into the mystery behind 11 sets of human remains found along Ocean Parkway. Suffolk Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart announced the belt, which is embossed with the letters WH or HM, depending on which way you look at it, was found some 9 years ago at one of the crime scenes along the parkway. Hart declined to say what prompted the release of an image of evidence. Well, yesterday's announcement marks the first time in several years that police officials have spoken publicly about the investigation into what authorities have described as one or more serial killers disposing of bodies along a desolate stretch of brush. Hart also revealed that the police department has sent DNA samples from the unidentified victims to the FBI for genetic genealogy analysis. That's a method of identifying remains through relatives of a murder victim or suspect. The state earlier this year gave Suffolk investigators, for the first time in New York, the green light to use the FBI to bypass state restrictions on the use of cutting-edge technology. Hart stated, "We do believe that this victim was handled by the suspect and did not belong to... this item, was handled by the suspect and didn't belong to any of the victims." So the department also announced the creation of a new website, www.gilgonews.com, that will serve as a clearinghouse for tips and new information related to the murder investigation. Not long after the announcement was made, the police department's Crime Stoppers line buzzed with callers. Hart, who before becoming police commissioner in April of 2018 headed the Long Island office of the FBI, also declined to comment on past statements or police statements about the investigation. John Ray, the Long Island attorney representing the Gilbert family, yesterday called on Suffolk police to release recordings and transcripts of a 911 call made when Gilbert disappeared. In November of 2018, a Suffolk judge ordered the county police department to turn over the recordings, but the department appealed the decision, arguing the evidence was part of an ongoing homicide investigation. An appellate court is scheduled to decide on the county's appeal next week. Well, Ray alleged, quote, "For 9 years, the Suffolk County Police Department has covered up the facts in this investigation. They have done an inadequate and negligent job of trying to track down the killer or killers," unquote. Suffolk County District Attorney Timothy Sinney, who attended the news conference along with other high-ranking police officials, including Chief of Department, Chief of Detectives, and head of the Homicide Squad, said law enforcement has continued to work diligently on the case.
Yeah. Somewhat of a surprise that kind of came back into the front of the news. We talked about it at the Decades Recap show, that was one of those stories that really kind of characterized...
I guess until it gets solved, it'll keep coming back up,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mind-blower, especially for people who used to hang out there and...
Yeah, no, I know you spoke about it in the past, and just thinking about how... Like we said, even the busy areas of the beaches and people, living their lives, and the areas that were around there, and some of the stories that are associated with that area, and it's just a real shame, that again that it had been pretty much a cold case and remains it. But I know people have been speculating that these kind of new stories and releases happen to coincide with the release of a new, I believe, Netflix or some kind of programming that's based on the murders. And not to say that there is a direct correlation, but it is interesting that like I said, this evidence is coming out now, and looks like a few things like that.
Maybe
audio
trying to spur somebody's memory, or something.
Yeah, whatever helps. It helps the victims' families.
There's a long cold case involved with a girl from Farmingdale, Tammy Mahoney.
Okay.
Was killed on the Oneida Reservation upstate New York. And
that's
been going on for a long time.
Up near Syracuse.
They couldn't get people from the reservation to, testify, and there was something about jurisdiction.
Yeah.
They just couldn't walk on the
sovereign
reservation
land
and start asking people.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
And this
thing.
has gone on this is more than 30 years, I think. This is maybe even longer than that. This could be a 40-year thing. Because she was young at the time. And if you go on the Daler pages on Facebook and stuff, you'll see people talking about it and, trying to drum up. But they're still working on it.
Yeah.
It's not like it's been dropped.
I'm sure for those families and for the people who knew them, there's no reason to stop. If you can, try to find closure from more information, then by every means, hopefully the police and everyone involved can try to get a little more information and really turn the corner.
It would be great to find the answers to these things. But and let's see, we have...
you got the environmental bond?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. This was...
That was in the State of the State address last week.
Okay.
And this is one of the big proposals.
I'm glad you brought that up, State of the State address. I watched the beginning of that show.
You were mentioning the pompous and the...
oh, my God.
The spectacle a little bit.
Yeah, I was just a little put off by, all right, give me a dais with the 15 or 20 people, but don't march in like, it was like, it reminded me of the wrestlers where they got to pick their song to come on, and, my cape, and, I was like, you guys are elected officials. This isn't,
It's not exactly an austere ceremony.
No, it was very, I don't know. I was kind of...
Yeah, we spoke about that a little bit last week, like I said. So, I'm sure certain people will feel that way as well. But
I guess there are others who'd say, well, it's just, it's today. It's entertainment,
Yeah, well...
But it shouldn't be entertainment.
The State of the Union, all the stuff, it's produced like it is like a sporting event in some ways.
Yeah.
So, that's network television for you, and that's...
Give me a little less style, a little more substance.
I'm always in favor of that.
I'd be better.
Oh, yeah. But this one looks like this may hopefully be some substance and may make an impact for a lot of the environmental issues that we're concerned about, both on Long Island, as a country, as a world, and throughout the state.
Okay, let's see what we got. This is environmental bonds proposal. Governor Andrew Cuomo proposed $3 billion Environmental Bond Act. This was in Newsday, and this is from Michael Gormley as the reporter. Well, Governor Cuomo, in his most sweeping environmental protection plan yet, has proposed a statewide $3 billion bond act that would include more funding for water quality projects on Long Island and create new artificial reefs in Long Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean. Cuomo said in his 10th State of the State address, quote, "No policy will be worth a damn if we don't have a planet to live on," unquote. And then Cuomo says, restore Mother Nature. The Bond Act would be the state's first major borrowing for environmental projects since 1996. The Environmental Bond Act would aim to bolster flood protection, purchase and preserve open space, create 4 more artificial reefs on Long Island Sound and in the Atlantic, and expand renewable energy power. Include a proposed Long Island shellfish restoration initiative to restock the Great South Bay with nearly 200 million shellfish, as well as expand freshwater fishing through stocking of popular sport fish and construction of more boat launches to attract tourism dollars. Cuomo's environmental plans would also require the state's 5 largest bus lines to operate fleets in which 25% of buses are electric by 2025. Also expand the number of electric charging stations, currently at about 4,000 statewide, for electric-powered vehicles. Well, the Bond Acts traditionally provide state government with capital for a variety of uses without tapping the state budget. The bonding would require approval by the state legislature, which has strongly supported such borrowing for environmental and public health issues in the past.
Yeah? What do you think about that, Bill?
Well, it's curious. I mean, you said it was the first time in, since 1996.
Yeah.
The question that popped right into my head, did we pay off that one yet?
True, and how many of those projects that were, again, proposed to be funded by it
got done?
Actually, were accomplished.
Those are the things we look at before we take step number 1 in the other direction.
I hear you. Like I said, I definitely see that concern, but I think that...
Oh, no, it's a great thing.
People are always talking about, well, we'd love to do things on these issues. We care about the climate. We care about all this stuff. Yeah. But the issue is always, well, we don't have the funding. Like we said with the water
But doesn't it seem as though, listen, we have a regular budget. We have regular money, things to run.
Yeah.
Every time it's something like this, now we got to sell the budget. Now it's outside of the other fiscal.
Yeah. Well, I hear you. The real thing that kind of gets to me is that it's one thing if this is a natural disaster, if this is Hurricane Sandy, if this is something that's out of the control, but if it's environmental degradation that we can see the direct causation from, again, misbehavior or something like that, then it is annoying and frustrating, as we've seen with the water issues, that they want, again, water districts and taxpayers to fund this restoration, but again, you didn't cause it, so I see where that definitely
But we're going to pay for it either way.
That's true, but at least I'd rather pay with it with some kind of arcane bond that doesn't come directly out of my pocket theoretically, and people who want to, like you buy baby bonds or whatever for your family, if you want to buy environmental bonds like war bonds, I think that's what has been posed as a lot, like the War Bond Act, kind of with the Green New Deal movement of trying to make people have like a patriotism to some extent. Like I said, that's a really good point to think about what happened in the past and if that's actually going to be accurate, but I'm going to keep my eyes on it and make sure that hopefully if it comes to fruition, like you said, that it actually goes where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But we got a few minutes left here. I think we could have mentioned, just some things. That one, we'll leave that because that's kind of related. Okay. I think we've already touched on that. We did a report with a Newsday reporter, I believe, David Schwartz in the past. It was to a similar effect. This was just about how much was going to a couple of the districts about the water contamination issue, but we'll follow up on that next week.
Cool.
I guess other things just I want to mention quickly before I want to give you some time to speak your mind about some national stuff that was going on. I just wanted to mention that some stories that we will keep an eye on that are worth looking into, that will probably be breaking early next week and throughout the week before we're back on, is that it looks like the e-bike law may be passing, which would allow electronic scooters and the whole usage of those types of vehicles. Delivery drivers use them and everything like that throughout the whole state. So that's out here on Long Island. That affects those rental companies. And the other thing would be the big Cuomo budget address. So we had the State of the State last week, but now we have the actual budget address, which hammers out a lot of stuff. But
there was also a federal or New York State judge that stopped the vape
okay, there was, but also, Bill, I don't know if you saw it today. They just found 2 more deaths. One of them was a New York City 20-year-old. Again, so we'll watch that too. That's a good point. We'll see where that goes. But I know we wanted to cue you in now, give you a little time to just kind of talk about what's coming up nationally, what we see happening, where we haven't been in this place in my lifetime. I know. Well, actually, no, I lied. I am old enough. I vaguely remember the Clinton impeachment.
Remember Clinton.
But now we're here in 2020, and we're talking about.
I watched the opening yesterday, and. I don't know. I believe they said that, they needed 67 senators. That's a quorum, I guess.
I believe so. It's 2/3.
So they said that's all they needed was 67, and I saw the whole Senate, they all stood up, and they repeated after John Roberts.
It's an interesting sight to see, I tell you that much.
Well, you got to remember that pomp and circumstance kind of thing comes back. When were we established? 1776.
Powderwig days.
Yeah. So they went through all of the, the dog and pony show. Very nice. They all knew how and what to say, and I saw them all raise their hands and take an oath.
Yeah.
To do their best to make sure they go by the Constitution and that this activity would be legal and
Yeah.
And then last night on TV news shows, I see them talking. Oh well, no, we're not going to have any witnesses. No, we're not going to add any new information. No, why do we even call this a trial? This is what I just described it as, a dog and pony show.
Yeah, no, that's the whole concern. We want to have.
So what happened? What's happening to democracy? Does anybody give a hoot?
Real checks and balances. You can't have a wrestling WWE kind of let's just all play pretend and play patty cake situation.
Well, I've said this a couple of times. I was an older guy going back to Nassau Community when I went to school here. And, I came from a time when if something looked bad, most politicians just wouldn't do it. Even if in the underneath it, there was really nothing wrong going on. But they just wouldn't. Today, it doesn't seem like nobody really cares. If it looks terrible, tough.
Well,
if it is terrible, tough.
If you know that your seat is safe and you know that you can have a position and your constituency who funds you and votes for you keeps you in office, then I guess people are willing to even potentially commit perjury.
The one line that I've seemed to come up with after reading, so many people's thoughts and stuff like this is that apparently some people just want a king.
That's a whole other story, but like you said, we see strong men in other countries, and we see how sometimes it.
Well, and the situation in our country is enabling a lot of those guys
to do
a concern
what
they want to do because nobody's going to call me on it. The United States used to be the guy. People would complain we're the police of the world. Well, we don't necessarily have to pay to be, but we at least have to speak up when we see junk like that happening.
Yep.
No matter what country it's in.
Yeah. All right.
We're not doing that anymore, or as much as we did.
Well, we know that you are, and we know that we try to, and we want to focus on what's local. But again, something like that is a historic kind of event. So we just wanted to touch base with that, and glad to get your thoughts on that. So,
and it used to be that I used to complain about the clock on the wall screaming at me, but now it's the sports guys.
Yeah, they're got the gang of.
I think they're bringing in the grill. They're going to barbecue over in the corner there while the show's going on.
Tailgate.
You never know.
But we were talking about with Eric before. The Islanders were in the news today. The potential of them coming to do the final season out at the Coliseum. So
you're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College in. You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College in